Hey folks, Andrew here with Lone Star Percussion, bringing you a quick video on the Boss DB-90. We're going to be talking about how to change time signature and tempo using the loop function. Okay, so how to program your DB-90 to achieve tempo changes, time signature changes. There's three main buttons that we're going to be working with: the right button, the memory button, and the loop button. So the first thing that we'll need to know and be familiar with is the memory function. So let's go ahead and dive into the memory button. So you'll notice that just to the left of the tempo indicator, the word memory is now blinking. This is going to allow us to use the dial to cycle through all 50 of the available memory banks in the DB-90. Once you familiarize yourself with how to navigate through the 50 different memory banks in the Metronome, we can actually start to talk about how to save our tempo, time signature, and even our subdivision settings to a specific memory bank. Let's take an example. So let's say that we've got a phrase that is in 4/4 time signature, and it's going to be at 120 beats per minute, and maybe it's an eighth note phrase. Let's go ahead and start by scrolling up to 120 beats per minute right there. It just so happens that we're already in the 4/4 time signature. And I'm going to make sure that the eighth note slider's turned up, right? Because we're working on that particular subdivision for this first phrase. And once I've gotten those three settings to my liking, 120 beats per minute, 4/4 with the eighth note turned up, I'm going to go ahead and hit the right button. So you'll see that the number 1 is flashing below where it says memory. Since this is our first phrase, we'll go ahead and set that to memory bank number 1. And once we've made that selection, we'll hit the right button a second time. It'll flash really fast, and then it'll return to solid. So this is indicating that we have successfully saved our 120 beats per minute in 4/4 with the eighth note division into memory bank number 1. Right? So if we hit the memory button and we cycle through our different banks, we'll see that when we return to memory bank number 1, our settings are still there. After successfully storing your settings into memory bank number 1, it's time to move on to the second phrase. And for this purpose, we're going to say that we're a little bit faster tempo. Let's say that it's also going to be in a different time signature, and maybe it's got a different subdivision. So let's go ahead and hit our tempo button here. And this is going to allow us to adjust the tempo as we need to. And I'm going to say that this second phrase is at 160. And maybe it's also in 3. And instead of eighth notes, this one has a triplet subdivision, right? So we've got our tempo, our time signature, our subdivision selected. Let's go ahead and store this to memory bank number 2. So I hit the right button. And again, that number below the word memory is flashing once again. But I don't want to store it to memory bank number 1, right? Because that's where our first tempo and time signature was saved after I hit the right button once. So I'm just going to use the dial to go to memory bank number 2. I hit it a second time, flashes quickly, returns to solid. And there we go. I've got 160 beats per minute in 3/4 with the triplet subdivision saved successfully into memory bank number 2. So now, if we hit the memory button and we cycle between memory banks 1 and 2, you'll notice that those saved settings we can get to quickly. And if we hit the start-stop button while we're in the memory selection, we can flip between the two while the metronome is playing. With our memory bank set, now we can actually start to look at what the loop button is going to do. And this is a really important function, so let's go ahead and dig into this a little harder here. So when we press the loop button, this first screen that we see can definitely be mysterious at first, but it's actually really helpful information. So it's going to display what memory bank we're on, and then the main number in the middle is how many times we're going to repeat or loop through the settings that we saved in that particular memory bank. So for example, if we set this number to 2 on our memory bank number 1 being selected here, it's going to loop those settings twice. So this is going to give us 2 bars at our 120 beats per minute. Once it cycles and completes the 2 measures, it's going to move on to memory bank number 2, which leads us into another important point. While we're in loop mode, we can hit the memory button and cycle through our different memory banks so that we can start in a different place in the music. So let's set this up to loop our memory bank number 1 twice, which we've already done. And let's go ahead and have our memory bank number 2 loop 4 times. So this is going to give us 2 measures of 4/4 at 120 and 4 measures of 3/4 at 160 with the triplet subdivision, right? So if we hit the tempo button and we go back to take a look at our saved settings for memory banks 1 and 2, all right, that's what we're looking at, 120, 4/4 with the 8th note subdivision. Memory bank number 2, 160, 3/4 measure with the triplet subdivision. And again, if we go back into loop, we're going to make sure that we start on memory bank number 1. It's going to loop 2 times. And we're going to double check that memory bank number 2 is going to loop 4 times. So, starting on memory bank number 1, let's go ahead and press the start button and see what happens. And there you go. Okay, so to touch on just a few last notes in regards to programming this thing, I've gone ahead and set up a few more memory banks off camera just to kind of show off, again, the loop function and how it'll cycle through the different memories, as well as to show you how to start in different points in your show or musical piece. So starting from the top, if we want to cycle through everything that we've programmed, again, we'll just go to our first memory bank, we'll hit start, stop, it'll play through everything, and we can hit the stop button once we are done playing. So let's go ahead and hear what I've got set up, and then we'll figure out how to start at a point in the middle of the music. And there we have it. If we want to start in the midst of all of that, all we have to do is press our memory button, and we'll be able to cycle to whichever phrase we'd like to start at. And remember that this is only going to allow us to start at the beginning of that tempo or time signature change in loop mode. Thanks so much for tuning into our video on how to program your DB-90 metronome. If you have any additional questions, do feel free to give us a call at 866-792-0143, and be sure to follow us on all of our other social media platforms. We'll see you later.